Hello, my name is A. Joseph Dupre III. I'm a member of the Technical Product Management team within the Ixia Solutions Group at Keysight Technologies. And today in this video, I'm going to walk through the process of deploying the BreakingPoint Virtual Edition BPS VE on Microsoft Azure. So we're going to deploy BreakingPoint Virtual Edition in the public cloud on the Azure public cloud. The first thing that you'll do once the 9.00 release comes out is you'll go to the Ixia software download page. At the time of this video recording, I don't have access to the 9.0 download, but it'll look very similar to ones that you've used before. And there'll be a new section for 9.00. And one of the options will be to download a package for deployment on Azure. And what that will look like is you will get a tar.gz file, and you'll download that to your local machine. And what we need to do is we need to unpack that. So I'm going to go back over to the Azure console, and we'll need that momentarily. I'm going to unzip the archive, so the gzip and then the tar inside. And let's take a look at the package. Again, this was downloaded from the Ixia. It'll be posted on the Ixia support site under BreakingPoint Virtual Edition. There'll be an Azure option once that site goes live. So there's a subdirectory in here. There is a bash script. We'll be using that to copy images. So if you're familiar with BreakingPoint Virtual Edition, there is a system controller image, and then there is also a virtual blade image. So the bash script will help us copy the master images from Ixia account over to our local storage account so that we can use it in Microsoft Azure. And there'll also be a set of 3 templates that we can use. These are Azure Resource Management or ARM templates. They're written in JSON, JavaScript Object Notation. And what these do is once we have the images copied using the bash script, it will be very easy for us to deploy instances of BreakingPoint. So again, a system controller and a vBlade, for example. There's 3 different versions of these JSON files, these templates. One is basically the demo setup that we're going to do today. So that's very much a predefined configuration environment. It's a great option for getting started with BreakingPoint. If you just want to set up a predefined virtual network and you want to run some traffic through that network, that's a great way to do it. If you want to kind of step up to the next level and you want to have some more control over the IP addressing and the configuration, some more parameter options of still a standalone environment, you can do the new custom deployment, or the add-on custom deployment gives you some options for connecting to an existing topology. These are just samples, so again, they're very good at for getting started, and you can use those to get started. Typically, customers will use these as a reference point and then extend and modify them or merge them with other automation that they have. But ARM templates are a great way to understand the product and how it's deployed in Azure. Okay, so let's go back up a little bit here, a couple levels in that package, and let's go get the bash file. And what we're going to do is we're going to open up, so I'm on the Azure portal here. I've got a blank workspace, basically a blank dashboard, and we'll kind of fill that in as we go along. But the first thing we want to do is we want to upload the bash script. So we want to open up a bash cloud shell from Azure here. And I'm waiting for that to connect. Okay, so now I have a prompt, and I'm just going to do an ls in here. You can see that I have a bash script for our Ixia IXload product is in there, but I need to upload my BreakingPoint example. So I'm going to go to my download folder there. I'm going to browse for that bash file. Okay, it's been uploaded, so if I do an ls now, okay, I can see it. Now, one of the things you need to do is you need to make it executable, so chmod +x ixload chmod. Actually, the other thing we need to do is we need to, when it's uploaded, it gets some like control M characters and some conversion stuff. So we need to make sure it's converted to Unix format. It doesn't have extra junk characters in there. So we want to use the DOS to Unix command on the ixload.bash, and that will convert it to proper format for execution. Now, if I just, oh, sorry, I keep doing ixload. I meant to do, same thing applies to ixload, but let's do chmod star.bash, because we actually need BreakingPoint here, and I can do a DOS to Unix. Unix star.bash. So, okay. Okay, so that modified both files. If I do a /breakingpoint 90 etc.bash, and I just hit enter, it's going to tell me that I need some things set up before I can run this script, and I need to pass some arguments. So one of the things that it's looking for is a resource group. So I need a resource group that's going to hold the storage account, and the storage account is going to hold my local account copy of the master images. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and create a resource group. So we got a bunch of resources here, and I'm going to call this one BPS images, for example. Put that in a US region, or wherever you need to. Review and create. So validated and create. Okay, so I've got a new resource group, and what I can do is I can go to that resource group. It should be, I may have to refresh, let's see. Yeah, BPS images. Okay, and it's going to be empty right now, so it's an empty resource group. Resource groups are basically where you hold objects in Azure. You can organize them kind of logically. And so what I want to do is I want to execute this bash script, but I want to pass in my resource group, and I need to give a unique storage account name that it's going to create. So we're going to call this BPS IMGs. 2019 is probably not being used, and it will detect that that doesn't exist. Now I could have created the storage account manually, but I'm just going to let the script do it for me under that resource group. Let's hit enter. So it sees that the resource group exists, but it doesn't see the storage account. And if I refresh this now, it might take a moment or two, but it should create that storage account here. Okay, I've got a JSON response code back, so it probably means that, yep, there it is. BPS IMGs 2019. And what you're going to see happen if I kind of go down the directory structure here, I'm going to go to the blobs. That's where we're copying things. And it created for me in that storage account a container, BPS VE VHD 900 for the 9.00 release. And if we go in here, what we can see is that it's creating some VHDs for us. So these are page blobs, and these basically correspond to the virtual blade and the controller. And the controller is a little bit larger, so what you can see in my bottom corner here is that it's doing the copy right now, and that will take some time. So one nice thing with the previous version of BreakingPoint on Azure, the virtual controller was much, much larger, so it's significantly reduced in size. So that'll make, and we've created this bash script to simplify copying that to your local environment. So instead of waiting for that to complete, which will take some time, what I'm going to do is go back to my resource groups and show you one of the resource groups that's already created the same exact way. So we'll kind of use that. And what I'm going to do is, if I go to images 2019, this was created in a similar fashion using the bash script. And what you can see is if we go to images 2019 storage, that's what that happened to be the name, the unique name that I used for that storage account. Under the blobs, we can see that there is a BPSVE VHD 900 container that it created, and I already have some VHDs. The other nice thing is, in addition to creating the page blobs, if you go to the top of your resource group level, and that's done at the end of the script, you'll see that there's a BreakingPoint virtual blade image, a managed image, so a Microsoft managed image created, as well as a virtual controller. So you can make many, many copies of the same thing. And so the nice thing is that the bash script does the heavy lifting of, if you create a resource group, give it a destination resource group, it will copy those page blobs over. It'll take some time, and you can see that happening. I'm going to close this because I need my full screen here. But you wait patiently, it will complete, and you'll probably get like a JSON return code, and you'll kind of be able to see that the file is not writing. So if I look at it here kind of in storage, if I refresh my account, I can probably see BPS images. You can kind of let the script run there, and you can also you'll kind of see, if you're looking at your directories, you can kind of see the controller refresh as it writes a little bit, so every couple of seconds there it's writing some more data, but that will eventually complete, and you'll know that you're ready to use that. So again, we're going to use the ones in the images 2019 directory because those are already completed and done, and the image link has been created for us. And so what we want to do now is we want to upload one of our templates. So I'm going to go over to templates here. And let's go add a template. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to that unpacked directory, and I'm going to select an example. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the demo one, because that's a great one to get started with. So you can kind of see the structure of BreakingPoint and how it's stitched together. So this will create, again, the virtual networks with some predefined IP addressing, the system controller and the virtual blade, and stitch those all together for you so you can send traffic on two subnets. And just a point of order that this video is not a training on BreakingPoint Virtual Edition. It's primarily focused on the deployment. So we want to get you up and running so that you can then license and configure your BreakingPoint. So we'll kind of take it up to the point where we can convince ourselves that we have our ports and we're ready to start BreakingPoint. So certainly check with your local sales engineer, sales team if you need assistance running BreakingPoint Virtual Edition. So let's go ahead and add our Azure Resource Management, our ARM template, to the library. So I'm going to create a new one. I'm going to paste that name and into the description, but there's some characters it doesn't like, so I'm going to put an underscore here for the name. And then what I'm going to do is go back to the file. And again, this is the demo setup one. Make sure I grab the right one. And I'm going to go open that, select it all, copy it, and I'm going to paste it into the editor. Control V here. Hit OK. Okay, so it was a little quick there on the video maybe, but it did a validation to make sure that it's kind of validly formatted JSON. Click Add. And typically I have to hit refresh here to see it, but it's there. Okay, so here's my BreakingPoint demo setup deployment. And then what I can do is this becomes a link that I can click on. And you can see that there's an option to edit if I want to, if I want to customize it myself and further look at it in the editor. I can do that, make some changes and stuff, or I can just go deploy it. I'm going to go ahead and do that. And what this will do is this will open up the template and it'll ask me for some basic parameters. And again, the demo one is the most predefined, right? So it has the fewest number of parameters, and even many of those parameters we'll see, you know, we can use the defaults for them, and then the others we have to customize to our environment. The new custom deployment template has some additional options for IP addressing. The add-on template is the one that you can use to insert BreakingPoint. It's an example of how to insert BreakingPoint into a pre-existing environment. So there might be a pre-existing virtual network with some subnets that you want to attach, and so those again are examples that you can use, and again go ahead and take those and extend them and modify them and customize them to your environment. But again, if you're just getting familiar with BreakingPoint Virtual Edition on Azure, the demo setups are a great way to start. Okay, so one of the things I want to do is I want to create a new resource group for this, for my objects to live in. So let's call this BPS demo, or actually BPS deployment. I'm going to call this BPS deployment. That's not taken. Okay, so it's going to create a new one in the US in this case. Now, my images, you may remember, are in images. We're going to use the not the one that's still being copied over, but one that's already done that way for us. You know, I ran it before, so I'm going to use that. It's the same process, run the bash script and do that, you know, in your bash shell. So images 2019. Now, you need to supply an inbound IP address. This is for your security group. So these are what IP prefix is allowed. So in this case, I'm using a corporate address. If you're not sure, you know, just do a Google search for what your IP address is, and it will tell you, because it's not necessarily your internal IP address, it's the IP address that the outside world can see. And you need that for the inbound rules of the security group. That's what allows you to get into the machine. So this is not the IP address of the machines that are going to be created. This is your IP address that is going to try to connect via HTTPS, for example. Okay. I'm going to use the defaults here because they should match with what's in my account. Those were created by the script, so those are going to. I'm also, you know, you can play with the VM sizes, but we have some defaults set up for you. So far the only thing I've really, you know, and obviously override this with your a valid IP address, you know, /32 for your you know, where you're going to you know, connect via the web. So I'm going to leave these kind of alone, leave the default sizes. I'm going to change the diagnostics, because if I look at my account, my boot diagnostics live in this storage account that again was created ahead of time. So you'll need to point it at the proper storage account for your diagnostics. Okay, 2019. I'm going to give it a little optional prefix is just to identify, like a little tag to identify your VM. So we'll call this BPS deploy. We'll call this, and you can put like a user email, you know, to tag, you know, some additional tags. You know, you can certainly add your own. You know, you can customize your the JSON, you know, if you edit those. So these are just some basic ones that we included. So BPS deploy at keysite.com, for example. And I'm going to, you know, whatever your project is, something that's meaningful to you, you might be working on something. You can give it a little user tag there. You do have to accept the terms and conditions. And I believe I've done everything correctly. So you can see the purples represent things that I have overridden in the defaults. The rest are kind of defaults there. Again, you'll have to specify your source IP address. Let's go ahead and purchase that, indicating that we want to get this up and running. Okay, and our deployment is in progress. So let's go take a look at that. Click on that link there. And, you know, it'll refresh, or you can kind of force it to refresh every so often. It takes a little bit of time to get going. Here it goes. You can start to see it building objects. So we started from nothing. So remember, we even created this resource group. We had our images put into our account. We had a boot diagnostics, a little bit of setup, where you point the template parameters. But in terms of the actual objects for our testing and our running, this is all being kind of built from scratch, during this video here. So you're kind of seeing this in action here, and you can see it'll refresh every once in a while, or again, you can kind of force some of the refreshing, and you can see all the objects that are being created. And we'll come back, they're spinning here, and the checks mean that something is completed. Okay, everything looks good so far. Let's go back to our dashboard, because our dashboard's pretty empty right now. So let's customize that. We can go to resource groups on the left here, and we can go to that BPS deployment resource group. Let's go ahead and pin that to our dashboard. Okay, if we go back to our dashboard, so it's kind of a handy place to keep widgets and statistics and things that you're going to use a lot. So if we're going to use this environment quite a bit, and you can even refresh things here and see what's being built. Okay, the other thing I want to do is go back to the resource group, and I like to sort by type to see what's built, and you can kind of see there are some disk images that are being created from that image. So when the bash script completed, it copied over some page blobs, and then it created some managed images out of those. And those managed images are the basis for these disk files. So when you create your own target deployment, it goes, grabs that image, and makes a local disk image for you based on that master. So that is really great, because you can have lots of different deployments in your environment, and they're all created from that master set of images. So we've got one for the system controller, one for the virtual blade. We have a number of Ethernet interfaces. So the system controller has an ETH0 and an ETH1. One is for management, one is for command and control. And then the virtual blade, in this case, has a command and control interface, and then it has 2 test networks. And we can look at those in a second, and we can look at the networking, but those are going to be attached to the 2 test subnets. We've got a security group that's been configured to allow that inbound IP address. The machine has a public IP address and a public DNS, so we can reach it, right? It's in the cloud, so it needs that. And here's the actual running virtual machine instances. So these are the actual instances set up with our VM sizes. Which we defaulted in our example. And then we have the Vnet. So let's take a look at the Vnet. So the virtual network. And we can see all the different, here's kind of a summary showing all the different things that are attached. And you can see that we have some items in the 10.0.10 network, which is management. Some items in the 10.0.1.11, 10.0.1. 10 here. These are the virtual blade connections, that we're talking about, the management interface to get to those. So we have that. So this is kind of one private IP address, which is going to be connected to a public IP address, and then we've got some internal communication that we can do, and then we've got a number of IP addresses, primary and secondary IP addresses, on the one test network, the .2, and then on the second network, the .3. And if we want to take a look at that in another way, we can see the subnets that are associated with our environment. And this is very common. So if you're previously familiar with BreakingPoint Virtual Edition deployment in like a VMware or a KVM, for example, or maybe Amazon, for example, we have the AWS deployment. This will look very similar, because you typically, again, create the management subnet. That's where you use the web interface to configure your test cases and such. And then you have typically a control network, which talks to the vBlades, the virtual blades, and then you have a number of IP addresses on your test interfaces. So in this case, we have 2 test subnets. Now, for those of you that might have caught that on the video, there's actually a little message that we got here. Let's take a look at our messages, and let's clear some things out. So we had created a resource group. That's great. We had created a template. We had pinned some things to our dashboard. And we'll do some more of that. But since it popped up, I wanted to point out that we actually got an error. It says deployment failed. So let's drill into that. see what's going on there. So that's just happened with our deployment, okay? And we've got a couple of conflicts here. Let's see, what is this on? Now you kind of have to move this over a little bit so you can see what's going on. And it seems like, okay, most things are green, but we got a couple of reds here. And it says conflict, and this seems to be the system controller and the virtual blades. These are the actual VMs. Let's take a look at the error under operational details and let's see what it says. And if you kind of hover over here, it's going to basically tell you that the deployment failed with an OS provisioning client error. And without getting too deep into it, the easiest way to understand this is these are custom images from Ixia, and they are copied from a master image over to your account, and they're unmanaged page blobs at first, right? So it converts it into a managed image, but they kind of start out as these kind of VHDs that are out there, and they're custom, images, custom versions of our controller and vBlade, and as of yet they're not in the marketplace. That's that's a future direction, but they're right now just kind of unmanaged page blobs that are copied over to your account. And the short version is that it's very common to get this type of error if you have something that's kind of been externally brought into Microsoft Azure. So it's just complaining that some of the provisioning that would be necessary for a full managed image is not being done. The good news is this doesn't stop us from running, and we've seen this with other tools as well when you move them into Azure for the first time. So we're just going to confirm that that's the same message that we got from OS provisioning client error. So that actually doesn't bother me. That's okay, because we'll see that our VMs, the key thing is that our VMs are running. Okay, so let's do this. Okay, so what I want to do is go back to the dashboard, back to our resource group, and let's go ahead and we sorted by type. And let's put those at the bottom there. I want to grab the system controller and pin it as a widget. Go back to the resource group. So everything's just kind of a directory structure and a series of links. And you can pin things that you are interested in on the dashboard. You actually see it does say it's running. So that's a good sign. Okay, so it is actively running. If you click and kind of look at the overview, you'll see that it says it's running here as well. So it has an IP address, a public IP address. It has a public DNS. So at this point, we actually should be able to work with it. So let's go to the controller, grab its public DNS, and let's paste and go. And it actually responded. Go ahead and hit advanced. It's okay to proceed here. It's giving like a little bit of a certificate error there, but go ahead and connect. So again, if you're familiar with BreakingPoint, you've seen that before. And it should open up the login page, and it tried to autofill some stuff for me, but let me just go ahead and put the default in there. And there we go. So that was pretty quick. Didn't take too many minutes to have a controller up and running, and it also says, according to Azure, the vBlade is up and running. So let's go ahead and let's do some administration here. Let's launch administration, and this, again, is classic BreakingPoint Virtual Edition. So you can download the 9.0 user guide when it comes out, or take a look at one of the earlier user guides. And this part is pretty consistent, is consistent across the different platforms you might deploy on. And we're going to go over to VM deployment here, manage virtual chassis. And we want to assign some virtual chassis. Okay, well, what are their addresses? Let's go back and check that out in Azure, because again, this was a nice environment that's already stitched together for us and already set up. So it takes a lot of the heavy lifting out of that. It's all done by by the template. That's the great part. So let's go back to our dashboard and let's take a look at what the vBlades IP address. So it has a private IP address of .11. Let's go ahead and copy that. And if everything has been stitched together properly, I should be able to go ahead here, add this in, and click verify. And so there's a good checkbox there, and then hit apply. And what this is doing is this is assigning that virtual blade its management. It's making it available to the BreakingPoint UI there. Okay, now it's not going to mention hypervisor. Don't worry about that. It is in Azure and it is seeing it. 10.0.1.11 two interfaces. That's it for the management part. If we go back to BreakingPoint, I mean, basically we're good to go. But let's take a look in BreakingPoint. And again, this is not going to be a tutorial on BreakingPoint or BreakingPoint Virtual Edition itself. So definitely contact your local sales team if you need help doing that. But we're going to just verify that this topology is ready to go. Basically, that the deployment was successful and everything kind of checks out. And we kind of already saw that in the admin view, but let's go ahead and take a look at a BreakingPoint session and just look at our chassis from here. And what you're going to see is you have a single vBlade slot with that 10.0.1.11 management interface, and then two test ports. And these are connected to your .2 and your .3. And so you can load in a BreakingPoint config. If I take ownership of these ports, you can see everything works smoothly and you're basically ready to go. At this point, you would go into your control center. You need to, of course, license, so this BreakingPoint uses the traditional BreakingPoint Virtual Edition floating license. So you can, again, contact your sales team to get an evaluation or purchase a license. And you can, under administration, you can set up the licensing for that so that you can run your test cases and they can help you import and load configurations. But from an Azure point of view, we're good to go. So I just want to kind of review what we did so you can kind of see that how that worked out. The first thing we did was we went into resource groups and we created a resource group to store our images. Now, that was BPS images, and it's probably actually done. In fact, it is. So while we were doing, I didn't use this one for time's sake because we didn't want to wait while it copied, but it actually, in the time that I've done this video, it actually copied over. So that would have been, you're originally an empty resource group. You uploaded, remember, into the Cloud Shell. You open the Cloud Shell, upload the bash script, do a chmod +x of the bash script and a DOS to Unix to make it executable. Pass it your BPS, images in my case, or your local resource group, and the name of the storage account that you want to create, or if you have one already and it can find it, it will do that. And then it will, again, it created for us, I copied the master Ixia page blob images under blobs here. It created a storage account, BPS VHD 900, did this all for us, and it created those VHDs. But the great news is we don't even have to reference those VHDs directly. In our resource group at the top level, it created the managed images for us. So those are what we used in our template. We took the other templates, which are JSON files from that package that we downloaded on the Ixia support site. Right, again, those will be live when 9.0 gets posted soon. We went ahead and we added templates to our template folder. Right, in this case, we had three choices, and we went with the kind of the easy one, which was our demo template, and then we chose the option to deploy. We gave some extra information and set our options. Where's our boot diagnostic storage account? where our image is located, what resource group, that type of information, and a pointer to those things, and what our source IP address was. We created that resource group using the template, did all the heavy lifting for us, creating all the resource group itself, creating all the objects within our resource group. We pinned those things to our dashboard, and it left, even though it generated an OS provisioning error during the deployment, it doesn't affect us in any way. We have running virtual machines that we can now start and stop and run test executions for, and we verified our virtual network information, and we use that information to log into the public IP address or the public DNS of the BreakingPoint system. We did that, and we did the administration, launched a window there to add the virtual blade to the controller, and then we launched a virtual session of BreakingPoint to basically configure our ports, and now we're ready to run our test. So that's really BreakingPoint on Azure deployment in a nutshell. I hope you found this video helpful in doing that, and thanks for watching.